This is an RNZ podcast.
They say it takes a village to raise a child. I'm Catherine Ryan, and here we draw on my conversations with experts on 9 to Noon to help you navigate family life. Educationalist Frances Adlam is with us with tips for parents on how to help their children love reading and writing. Her book, Raise Your Child to Read and Write, aims to give caregivers strategies to engage preschoolers and primary school entrants to get a good start to a lifetime of reading. With degrees in education, psychology and counselling, Frances Adlam's been a teacher and a lecturer and also an advisor to the Ministry of Education. She's also written resource books for teachers. She says there are very simple things that parents and caregivers can do to help, including thinking about how to talk to your children and encouraging them to scribble, draw and paint. All the building blocks that lead to writing. Frances, good morning.
Good morning, Catherine.
So, as we said, you've helped teachers with resource books. Is this about helping parents become the classic first teacher?
Absolutely. And this book evolved from my workshops with teachers because a lot of kindergarten teachers and new entrant teachers thought it would be incredibly helpful if parents had this knowledge of the building blocks for children to read and write.
And what are they? If we begin at the beginning, long before writing or reading as we know it is going to be possible, what are you trying to build?
So one of the main points of the book is that often we worry about children's reading and writing around the time that they start school, which can be about 4.5 years old to 5 years old. But actually the whole journey and the building blocks start at birth, from when we're talking and singing to our baby and tuning them into the sounds of our language. And then there's many developmental stages and experiences children need to go through so that they have these lovely toolkits when they get to school so that reading and writing is more easeful. So we could break those into 3 key areas. One is talking with your child, and is incredibly important because that is the foundation of learning language. And then for writing, all the scribbling and mark making and art sort of activities build those skills in many ways. And then for reading, there's 2 areas. We need to tune into our language, so we can do that with lots of songs and nursery rhymes and stories. And then we need to understand that text is in books and on screens, and sort of the whole concept of how we use language in our culture.
How do you do this well in the early years? What to do and what perhaps not to do in each of those areas?
Okay, well, the most important thing is that children are going to learn or be immersed and interested in things that feel good to them. And that's why when we read children's stories, often it's the snuggle with mum, dad, or the grandparents that's as enjoyable as the story. So experiences need to have a sense of fun and be enjoyable for children. And then they will want to do more of them. And this obviously will build their skills in this area. Sometimes, if we talk about what not to do, sometimes in this sort of instant gratification, busy world, we do tend to think that we can just quickly teach these things, and we take a lot of the fun out, so we focus on the tools like, oh, my child must know their alphabet, and we make it quite sterile, or we can do, which can possibly put children off.
Let there be a process of discovery and
Yes,
go with what they're doing rather than trying to prescribe what they're doing.
Absolutely. So we have to follow our own child and what they're interested in, and play and fun are actually how young children learn.
Do some people sometimes in their enthusiasm also try to bring a structure to what they're doing a little bit early?
Possibly, and this is one of the things that some of the feedback from the kindergarten teachers and the new entrant teachers was happening, that if we give this structure too early for some children, it can be disheartening for some children, and it's not necessarily motivating for them.
Well, let's talk a little bit about for example, let's break them down again. When you are, you talk about the scribble journey, right? So
Yeah.
when a child is picking up, I don't know, some kind of implement early on, is the focus just on them making the association between that scribbling and meaning, rather than you feeling like you need to start teaching them the alphabet or showing them how to do their alphabet?
Absolutely. So before a child can start to write letters, there are because it is different with different models, but there are about 8 stages of scribbling a child needs to go through before they can actually start to write their letters. Now, the first stages are all about sensory pleasure, that the child is enjoying playing with sticks in the sand, or playing with finger painting, or playing with the clay. These are all building up the idea of mark making, and the child is immersed in them because they're so pleasurable. So if we come in with our adult perspective too early, that, we need to teach them how to write a letter, we haven't built up those building blocks, and it is not meaningful or purposeful for a child. And that's when often they don't get all those hours and hours that they need to just build their fine motor skills and to do mark making. So mark making originally is a way to express ourselves. Yeah, all writing is a way to express ourselves. So mark making can start even a toddler in a high chair when they are squishing and squeezing their food about the little table thing on the high chair, which is possibly, a little bit annoying for if we've got to clean up all the mess. But actually that's the first experience, or one of the first experiences of mark making, where they're enjoying this sensory pleasure with their hands and they're expressing themselves.
Is it okay to do what I just said, and even preschool, for you to help them learn how to draw their letters?
Absolutely. I think the key is to have an understanding of roughly what stage your child is at. So, and in the book, I set out the stages quite clearly. So, for example, children will just make marks quite randomly. I mean, first of all, a child has to make the connection that this crayon, when I bang it on the paper, look, it makes a mark, and that has to be, exciting and interesting. And then from there, they will practice, and they start to make marks which are lines and which are curved lines. And then from there, they slowly get ready to write their letters. So if we let children go through these developmental stages and then we help them shape their letters, that's absolutely, wonderful. But what often happens is sometimes we try and get children to write letters when they haven't been through all those stages. So there's this big gap between what we're trying to get them to do and what actually they're developmentally ready to do.
And that becomes a stress, and that's not what we want to happen. As
Absolutely.
you say, you want it to be fun. All right. What about in the older child who is learning to write, including at school? What can you do at home to support that? Because one of your points is, with their early writing, they'll mimic the stuff they've seen at home. They'll mimic your writing, what they've seen about the place.
Yeah.
And as they're beginning to more formally learn, what can you do to encourage that?
Okay, well, there's 2 things here, really. First of all, children, all of us, when we're learning, we want to see the purpose of why we're doing something. So we need to immerse children in meaningful activities around writing, which is quite tricky in this sort of technological age. So we possibly need to be more conscious of doing this. So when we allow children to, or give children opportunities to write postcards to grandma and granddad, or write letters or notes or birthday cards, this is all modelling sort of good, useful experiences about why we write. Without any purpose, just focusing, say, on handwriting or letters is very meaningless for children. If we want children to their handwriting needs to have more practice, then sometimes at home, after they've had a long day at school, a parent might possibly just do lots of doodling and scribbling. They actually need to build their fine motor skills and not necessarily be taught at home how to write the letters. They can be taught that at school, but the hours of using pencils, pens, and building those fine motor skills and having control over that is very useful.
The link between reading with your child, to or with your child, and their learning to write, they're not separate activities.
No, they're not.
And so how does your reading assist with their learning to write, and what can you do to, again, support that process?
Okay, so reading and writing overlap in many ways. I work with children that struggle at school. Many of them might have dyslexia or dysgraphia or something like that. And I can tell a child who has had stories read to them a lot, because when they're writing, they understand innately the rhythm of how a story works, you know, the wonderful beginning, and then all of it, and they use the language of stories or whatever they've been read. So all that rhythm, the vocabulary that a child hears when they are being read stories, it all gets transferred to their writing. So they sort of weave very much like that, if that makes sense.
You mentioned children who, and this I'm sure is on parents' minds, because children learn to read and write differently from each other. They go through different stages, and they don't necessarily go through constant linear progress. It's one of the debates we have around assessment at school in the early years.
Yeah.
So what are you looking for if a parent's beginning to worry about their child's development in these areas?
I think if a parent's beginning to worry, then the most useful thing for them to think about is to be very specific. What are they worrying about? Are they worrying because I often get parents saying to me, "Oh, my child's not learning at the same way that their brother or sister did, and so this worries them." But it's not necessarily that the child is not moving forward; they're just moving forward in a different way. So we need to be quite specific, because there are so many layers to reading and writing. But some key markers, which we often forget, are that for a child to learn to read and spell with ease, they need to hear the sounds in our language, in our spoken language. So a child that's had lots of, let's say, ear infections or problems in this way will have had times, weeks, months, where they haven't been able to hear the sound of language, and that impacts their journey of learning easily in this area. So a lot of the things that parents worry about can often, so if they're medical and physical like that, they will need to go obviously to a specialist. But if it's just that the child's not particularly interested, and so not doing a lot of writing or not really interested when you read a story, we just need to look at the individual child and think creatively, oh, how can I turn this around and engage them in this activity?
You also make the point that adults often look at the end product, whereas you should be looking at progress in the process. Can you explain that a little bit more? Like, you want to know, can you write a letter and can you write a sentence? But actually you should be looking at progress towards that end, right? Key stages of progress towards that end, including, as you say, just an interest in doing it, in the whole activity.
Yeah. So I think that sometimes there's thinking in certain areas of society that writing sort of magically happens when a child's just about to start school. And so I guess the point of the book is to say that your child needs to be immersed in all these experiences and all of them really are traditional experiences, painting and mark making and scribbling. And then at the end of all those experiences, a child will evolve into the part of the journey where they learn to write their letters. So what I'm trying to get across is an understanding for parents to see that, because often parents will worry and think they're not writing letters, oh no, and rather than thinking, okay, well, actually they haven't had a lot of scribbling or any of this experience, so maybe we need to pump that up before they're going to be ready to write letters.
How you receive what they try to communicate to you, whether it's mark making or oral language or painting or drawing, this is important, right? Because as with every human, they are trying to express how they feel, and they're trying to do it a new way.
Absolutely.
So is the principle to encourage and welcome pretty much anything they're offering you, so that it feels good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. That is what we're trying to do. Because sometimes we forget this. We get all technical about alphabet and letters, but the purpose of writing is to communicate and to express ourselves. So when a child does scribble writing, which is often that they're modeling what they see adults do, so it looks a bit scribbly, but you can see that they're pretend writing, they are trying to express themselves. They're putting their little hearts on the paper, and so we do need to receive it in that way and honour it in that way.
What are some of the most common myths about learning, either learning to read or learning to write? And as we said, they're intertwined. But what are some of the most common myths?
So a very common myth is that boys don't like reading and writing, which is nonsense. There's a lot of science in this area. So possibly we just often need to be more creative about how we offer reading and writing experiences to different children.
Just find a book they love, and are you fine with some of the wonderful graphic or comic illustrated books that are coming out that are full of fart jokes, and it's just whatever someone wants to read?
Absolutely. What we're aiming for is that a child enjoys reading and writing, because if they enjoy it, they're going to do it more, and if they do it more, they will get better at it. It's that simple. So and also we might want to be more creative with all our movers and groovers, whether they are girls or boys. Possibly we want to take the reading and writing outside. Possibly we want to do mark making with sticks in the sand pit. Possibly we want to go on word hunts out in the garden. We need to be a little bit creative sometimes with how we engage young children in this area.
Some of the other myths, what's the story with how you hold a pencil these days? It used to be a subject of great stress and controversy.
Yeah. So the whole idea of having what we might call good pencil grip is that it is more easeful for the hand, so the hand won't get so tired as it starts writing more and more and more. So there are different stages. There's about 5 stages, depending what model you follow. And the book does have the stages in for the pencil grip. Again, those stages evolve through many hours and days and years of holding different pencils, pens, paintbrushes. So if a child has not had a lot of experience in this area and not done a lot of mark making, they're not going to, when they hit 5, suddenly be able to have a wonderful pencil grip, because they just haven't had the years of experience in holding these tools. So so that's the thinking behind it. Yeah.
One emailer has asked about whether music can and does have a role in helping the development of reading and writing, certainly with things like nursery rhymes and, beginning to understand the rhythm of language. But music itself, your comment?
So Music is hugely important for children to as one of the building blocks for reading and writing, because what music does is it's tuning the ear to hear sounds and differentiate tones. And when we are talking, all the words coming out of our mouth all have different sounds in, and that's essentially how we learn language. So music is very important. And for children, singing age-appropriate songs and listening to music and dancing and all those activities play a key part in building those foundational skills.
What is the fundamental message? And I mean, I think you kind of alluded to it. It's just time and a positivity around all these experiences that are the building blocks.
Yes, it's that reading and writing, learning to read and write is a journey. It doesn't just miraculously happen because your child reaches a certain age. And the journey starts at birth from, babbling and cooing to your baby and all the things that you do up to the age when they start school. Each child goes to school with all these hopefully beautiful toolkits of language and stories and mark making. Hello?
Yes, listening, yeah.
Yeah, and so the richer those toolkits are, the more easeful it will be for them to learn to read and write at school.
I think you got a blast of my producer in your ear.
I think so too.
She apologises. Just finally, you did mention children with dyslexia or with other learning differences or difficulties. What would you say to parents from your vast experience in this area? What would you say to parents if that is the case? To encourage them, I guess, and what we are learning about ways to help these students.
So I work a lot with children who have dyslexia or dysgraphia, and the main thing to remember is that children with learning differences can all learn to read and write. It just means that their journey will be a little bit different, possibly, from other children that don't have these learning differences. And it will mean that at certain times they will have to put more effort in. And as a parent, we need to be supportive and appreciate this. Because it's going to be more effortful as their brain's not wired in a way to make it nice and easy, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you, Frances Adlam. Her book is Raise Your Child to Read and Write.